After my altercation with Parker, I knew I had to get Octavia out. She was being mistreated, and I didn't think it was just kink play. The very next day I waited until Parker got to the dealership, then snuck out shortly after he saw me there. I didn't want to give him an indication I was doing something. He had grown increasingly paranoid over the few weeks. I had my keys. I also had some tools. I was going to break in if need be. Luckily, the front door was not any more locked than my key could handle. I knew it wouldn't be long before Parker noticed on the doorbell cam and made his way here. I went straight to the room where he put Octavia the day before. It was locked. I could hear the sound of metal banging off itself when I hit the door. I called out to her, and she yelled back, "I'm in here." I pulled back and kicked the door. The lock held up, as did the hinges. The cheap wooden door did not and cracked. I kicked again, and it was breaking. I managed to break through, and it was as I had feared. She was his hostage. She began crying immediately. She was in a large kennel essentially. Completely naked, the only thing in her enclosure was a thin mattress that would fit on a cot. It was long enough to lay out, but not even tall enough to comfortably kneel on all fours. Is this where my brother has been keeping her all day, I thought? She had tears in her eyes, and begged me to help her get out of there. I checked the lock on the kennel. It was a big, thick, heavy-duty lock. I didn't have anything that could get through this thing with me. I checked the kennel bars. They were solid. They wouldn't be as tough as the lock, but they would take time still. Then my phone rang. It was Parker. He knew, and he was on his way. Octavia saw my phone light up and said, "He's coming. You have to get me out of here." She seemed frantic and terrified. I knew I couldn't get her out before he got here, so I did the only thing I could. If Parker called me on his way to his truck, I had about 25 minutes before he arrived. Police would only take 10 at most. I made the call. They arrived well ahead of Parker, along with fire rescue that had the right tool for the job. They got Octavia out and gave her a blanket to wrap herself. I had been moved outside. My phone rang again. It was Parker. "What have you done?" He seemed terrified. I am done with my brother at this point, yet still concerned, especially given his tone. "Parker, you need to turn yourself in. What you did to her was not right. We can get you some help." Then he said something I found massively confusing and horrifying. "Did she put in the code? Where is she? Where is she at right now?" I stuttered. What are you talking about? What code?" "Parker, just turn yourself in. She is with the paramedics now." He panicked, and the last thing he said directly to me was, "What have you done?" His truck flew into a small space between cop cars. Parker jumped out of the vehicle and came running onto the scene screaming, "She's the one, stop! You have to make her put in a code!" He was absolutely hysterical, yelling and screaming. He was running towards the ambulance when an officer tackled him to the ground. 2 more came over and they quickly had him pinned and cuffed. The whole time he was raving about a code, raving that it was her. I couldn't believe what had become of my brother. He was placed in the back of a squad car. He was still screaming the whole time. That's when we heard the pop, and that's exactly what it sounded like, just a little pop. A few seconds later there was another one. I looked to the squad car my brother had been placed in the back of. The side window was covered in blood. I sprinted to the car, as did officers. They opened the door, and I saw Parker look right at me. He was struggling as the blood poured from gaping holes in each side of his neck. Then I saw the life drain from his eyes. He slumped forward. The officers caught him and tried to put pressure on his neck. The paramedics rushed over. They attempted to tend to my brother, but it was obvious he was gone. I was just in shock, numb, like my brain couldn't process what I just saw. For some reason, Octavia popped into my head. I don't know why. I would have thought my mind would have been consumed by my brother's death. I turned to the ambulance she was originally taken to. She wasn't there. I made my way over. She wasn't anywhere. I kept looking. I began screaming at everyone that Octavia was gone. They took notice and began to search as well. No one found her. She disappeared in the commotion. I've been thinking about this for 2 days while the police processed the house. The medical examiner did an autopsy on Parker, and I was notified with the results. It's being ruled a homicide. The medical examiner told me it appeared someone created 2 very tiny bombs and had injected them into Parker's neck. I've had the house returned to me now. I'm not sure what the police found or evidence they took. I knew my brother better than them. I was hoping to come across a note or something, and I wasn't disappointed. There were a few spots I remembered Parker stashing stuff when we were growing up. It didn't take me long. In an old jigsaw puzzle I found it. I haven't taken the time to read it yet. I'm sitting here terrified of what I'm going to find out. I'm going to take my time, then I'll turn it over to the police.